Recently on Cosmic Disclosure, I described information that I'd received in a couple of briefings. And the information, the way it was conveyed, was confusing because I also was confused. I have been trying to understand the cycles of the sun and the context of the conversation I heard it in. And as you'll see here in a bit, there's a reason why I was confused, because scientists are actually confused. So recently we've heard scientists discuss that the universe is a giant simulation, that it's maybe a computer simulation somewhere, and we just happen to be living it out. While others in the past have thought that the universe behaves more like a giant thought. Now, consciousness is the key to all of this. Everyone talks about ascension, and they don't really, or they have a different idea of what ascension is. And a lot of this information is coming from these main sources. A secret space program, I had access to the smart glass pad. I would sit and I would read and ask the scientists or the engineers for their input, because a lot of it was just over my head. And they would explain, speculate among themselves, and that was the scuttlebutt that I would pick up on and that I brought with me on my testimony to Cosmic. The Anshar recently, when I spent a few days with them, interacted with me in a way through their technology that they shared with me their past, which they claim is our future. The Blue Avians have shown me this information on a completely different level, from a different point of view, from more of a sixth density point of view. And I've brought all those together to try to explain the recent information I've been given. So the SSP Alliance, they've been fighting for full disclosure. What originally caused the SSP Alliance to form was that they found out about the slave trade that was going on, the galactic slave trade, and the trading of genetic materials to other beings from other star systems. And they want the crimes against humanity exposed, as well as the technologies. These alliance factions pretty much formed out of Solar Warden in the beginning, and then some of the other secret space programs, like the Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate and the Global Galactic League of Nations, people began to defect and bring technology with them and information, which is the most important thing. And they could break out of the compartmentalization and then begin to fully start sharing information in a way that they couldn't before, and begin to put things together. Now, the Anshar, they claim to be humanity in the future. This has caused a lot of confusion. There already is a lot of confusion in the programs about Nordic-looking beings, because there are Nordic-looking beings that have been interacting with us since we formed the United States, at least, that we know. And some of them are actually from other planets. Others are from completely different, a dimension. The Anshar claim to be from a different time, a timeline, or a future timeline. So, there were arguments that I heard between the SSP scientist types and engineer types were that they were from another dimension. So there's a lot of discussion about where these people are from and exactly why they're here. So the Anshar, they're fourth density, they're us in the future. They live in an underground civilization, and they've been in a timeline war against the reptilians for tens of millions of years. And I heard a little bit more about the future that I'm going to share later on, about what occurred with the reptilians, how the reptilians were in servitude to this artificial intelligence. The reptilians are infested with nanites and are pretty much slaves themselves. And that all ties in at the end. The Blue Avians are part of the Sphere Being Alliance. They're sixth density beings, and As we've been speaking about recently, they were a part of this ancient builder race, this ancient builder race was a conglomerate group that had a vast empire in our local 52 stars about close to 2 billion years ago. And they have stated that they're responsible for delivering the law of one information, as well as several other teachings here on Earth. But I'll go into also more details about what they've said about all of our distortions and how we filter information, and even how I deliver information, through my own distortions. Now, they have claimed that they are the messengers and facilitators of the one infinite creator. And the realm they come from, we would basically consider an angelic realm. So we could basically consider them angelics, I would say. Okay, now this is where we're going to talk about the filters, because how many people have read The Law of One? Okay, and how many people think they understand distortions, what distortions are? Excellent. For those who don't, and I've used this metaphor before, so bear with me. When we begin this life, we come in with no memory, nothing. We have to rebuild we have to re-experience and rebuild who and what we are. So we have nothing around us except for little bits and pieces of information. We're constantly looking and picking those little bits and pieces of information, pieces of sand, and we're taking that information and that experience and we're putting it in a little dish and we grind it together. And then we make a little lens out of it. And that's how we look at the world and information. And as we build this lens, it becomes distorted with our emotions and traumas and how we perceive certain experiences. That's the lens that we hold up to light, which we're going to call information. And then the light gets diffracted through the lens, and it's not the type of the pure light. All of us, every single one of us, no matter how far we think we've come, we have one of those lenses that give us the distortions and the information we take in. So when I'm having an experience with these beings, I am bringing in that information through my lens, my belief systems, my experiences, my perceptions. And when I then turn and give the information to everyone else, the same thing is occurring. And you have to realize that when the information hits you, already distorted through my lens, it then has to go through your lens. So for them to deliver information like the Law of One to us through these lenses and get it in a way that will filter through all of our lenses in somewhat of a similar way to where we get the point is very difficult. And just know that the information that I'm bringing in is coming through my lens, and everyone should use their discernment. And also, some of this information can appear to be fearful, and the minute I talk about ascension, people say I'm spraying hopium everywhere, or if I talk about solar flash, it's fear porn. So it's all the energy we feed into it. It is really all that matters. So we're going to be talking about full disclosure, the solar event. Is our future the Anshar's past? And of course, ascension and what it is. So full disclosure, the time of the great revealing. We're coming to a time to where the energetics are going to create an atmosphere to where we're not going to be able to lie to each other. We're not going to be able to keep secrets from each other. It's already, watch the news. It's very difficult to keep things hidden. In this great time of revealing, I think we're gonna get a lot of truths. It doesn't sound like there's any plan to give us a full disclosure. That's something that we're going to have to fight for, but it's not something that's going to be just handed over to us. So, let's see. So the space program and the programs, they want, as I stated, a full disclosure. They want all the crimes against humanity information revealed, and a part of that is revealing our hidden history, which is quite expansive. The history that we don't know is amazing. Sorry, it's being a little distracted by the noise. Now, on the Anshar timeline, which they're claiming is our future, they didn't get full disclosure until after the solar event happened. What occurred was that the solar event knocked out all of the technologies, and all of our cosmic cousins just appeared in the sky and began to render aid. So it looks like, if we believe that our future is their past, then it could occur simultaneously, full disclosure and first contact. Now, the Blue Avians have always stated, I mean, the point when they wanted me to come out and tell people I was talking to 8-foot-tall blue birds, and I was like, no. And they told me that, I said, no one would believe that. But let's see, how many people do we have here? I said, no one will believe that. And they basically told me that it is not important whether or not they believe. This information just needs to filter into their consciousness, and thus into the mass consciousness, and then the job is done. It's, we don't need to convince people and argue and debate with them. They're less focused on full disclosure than on ET and technology than they are on us focusing inwardly and beginning to release karmic energy that is holding just about everyone back and anchoring us to third density. I've discussed in the past where each of our traumas is, and I've discussed how many of us, we have traumas that are holding us back from people. Some of them are dead and gone, and they still have the same power over us as they did when we were a child. When we have that going on, that type of trauma, there are memories that we don't want to relive. So our mind segments them, and it uses a part of your processor. It's constantly doing corralling that memory, making sure it doesn't pop out. And once that trauma is dealt with and that memory is nullified, the energy of that memory, then your brain can use the processor and open it up to work on other things. That's what they're more concerned about us focusing on than us praying to them, reaching out to them. They want us to reach inwardly. That's what, when you bring up disclosure, they always circle you back around to the inner work. Now, unfortunately, the Earth Alliance and a lot of the other groups that sit around in dark rooms and plan out our futures without our input have decided that they're going to trickle information out over the next 20, 50, 100 years, depending on if they have to mitigate any type of disclosures happening from the other side, and just make it a nice, long, prolonged disclosure, because they really, really don't think we can handle it. And I don't think we can handle it either, but I think we have to. It wouldn't be pretty, but it's something we have to do. And of course, full disclosure is the complete antithesis of that. I cannot talk today, I don't know why. And the complete release of crimes against humanity, and the involvement of ETs in our evolution. And pretty much all evolution occurs through stress, if you believe in Darwinism. So the solar cycles, this is where I really got confused, because I remembered that solar cycles were 11 years. That's just what I remembered from school. And it turns out that they are not on they don't always work on 11-year cycles. The last one, I believe, was like 7 years. You go through, we're exiting cycle 24 right now, and we're supposed to be going into cycle 25. According to all of the work that they've done predicting solar cycles, the solar cycles are supposed to be picking up in intensity, but they're reducing. And they're slowly, the sun is slowly getting weaker and weaker in intensity. Well, what I was realizing is that each of these cycles really is a pulse. The sun is pulsing. It's always pulsing. So the pulsing has been going on since the sun has existed. Now, the solar minimum date, when I was sitting across from Sigmund and he was giving the briefing, one of the people at the briefing asked Sigmund, have we entered solar minimum? And he didn't answer, and he kept speaking. So I found out later why he didn't answer. It's because you do not know that you have switched into solar minimum for at least 6 months, because they count sunspots, and they'll speculate when solar minimum will occur, but they don't know until about 6 months after it actually does occur, and they can say, okay, we are in solar minimum. And they're predicting that solar minimum will be between 2019 and 2020, this cycle, which, according to Sigmund, he said that if this solar event did not occur at the end of this maximum going into minimum, which I guess is going into 2020, that they did not expect the solar event to occur again until it came out of solar minimum into solar maximum again, when it came back alive. And that could be anywhere from 5-7 years, so there's really no way to predict it. But that does put us right back in the original timeline, pretty much, maybe a little bit past that the Secret Space Program was talking about, the 2018 to the 2023-24 period. So it's still around that period. Pretty much, in thinking that they were all 11-year cycles, I just added 11 years, and it added to the confusion. So, what is the solar sneeze? I saw in the smart glass pad how they had talked about it was going to be a massive 360-degree full mass coronal ejection. And also in the papers, they were thinking, some people were postulating that it was just going to be this major just energy pulse, and then people were going to turn into light bodies. There are all these different ideas about what's going to happen. According to the Anshar, what they showed me when I was sitting in one of the egg-shaped chairs and they were showing me their history, they showed me the sun explode. And when it exploded, it kind of exploded in an oblong way around the equators, where most of it exploded out, and then some out from close to each pole. And it was just huge waves of plasma coming in. The animation, it shows fire, but it was huge plasma clouds coming in. And we'll see in the animation later, I'm skipping ahead a little bit. I was sitting here and I was in the chair, and it was funny because the earth was hovering above my knees, and the sun was over here, and then the moon was moving and it was up here, and then there was a flash, and then all of the plasma that I mentioned you see leaving, and then it hits the moon, and then it hits the earth, and it hits the earth spins like maybe 20 degrees. It spins, and where it hit, there's a circle where it punches through the atmosphere, and it looked like it was above Europe and partially above the Pacific, and it was like a hurricane of fire that went down, and it boiled the water and burned the land in this one area, but it didn't destroy. It wasn't this huge destruction like they depict on Knowing or some of these sci-fi movies, where the earth is just completely destroyed. But there were some pretty rough side effects. I'm skipping way ahead. So in the programs, a lot of the nuts and bolts people thought this is it. It's going to be the end of all civilization, all technology. Everyone's going to die. Some of the others believed that it was going to transfer everybody immediately into light bodies. We're going to fly around and read each other's minds. It's going to be awesome. Yeah. And then others believed it was just going to be the start of some golden age somehow. Some were going to try to create a golden age through technology and AI, and the others thought it was going to go the spiritual way. But when it comes down to it, the truth is somewhere in between. One of the things Mika told me was that out of all the local 52 stars, how many of those, out of those local 52 stars, how many of them do you think everything unfolded just like in their religions and prophecies? None, not one. There were similarities, there was information that helped each of them prepare, but none of them were exactly like how they had been told in prophecy. And I think we can expect the same. So the Anshar, as I just stated what they showed me with the explosion, but when the solar explosion occurred and the energy and plasma interacted with the Earth, there was loss of life, but what occurred was immediately after that, our cosmic cousins came in and rendered aid. So the state of, I'm going to get much more in depth about this later on, but the state of humanity, I think, is what a lot of people are curious about. There was a kind of a split in the way people reacted after this catastrophe and upgrade. The people, I guess like us, that have been preparing and doing the work, we go through trauma, we have to go through a rescue ourselves, but we come out of it with a completely different understanding. This consciousness is this ascension is a consciousness shift. And when our consciousness goes through this shift, we see everything from a completely different way. All of our problems we see from different angles. We connect with each other in a different way because we start to understand oneness, how we are all one, and how we can communicate easier when you understand the full concept of oneness. And then we begin to kind of pull together and assist each other and work with the non-terrestrials. The vast majority of the population who had been asleep and not doing the work had a very rough time. Once they found out about the 22 genetic programs, they were told that they were being handed over the right to control their own genetics, they rebelled. They pretty much rebelled. They began to mix all of their genetics together. All races began to mix together. They began to hack their genetics, giving themselves like green eyes or purple hair or whatever, And they didn't understand until generations later, this is like generations going on, that the first genetic farmers that came in had genetically tinkered with them to a point where if they started to fully mix their DNA and hack certain parts of their DNA, that these horrible genetic diseases would occur. And even though we've been given all of this new technology from the surviving space program and these ETs, we don't understand what's going on. And eventually we reject the ETs. Not us, but the portion of humanity that doesn't do well during the transition, they're very distrusting of ETs for a number of generations. And eventually when they have this genetic disease, they have to call in the ETs for help. And then the ETs come in and assist them, and then they begin to open up to the ETs, and their consciousness begins to catch up to the rest, and after a number of generations, the consciousness gets to a point to where everyone is pretty much caught up. Mass consciousness is on this one kind of vibe. And then at that point, we begin to feel other groups, like we discover the Anshar deep in the earth. And then the Anshar come and visit us at that point, openly. And then it's very hard to describe about how timelines just kind of collapse together. Our present and their future just kind of comes together. When they're openly contacting us and they have technology 20 million years in the future, all of a sudden now we're 20 million years in the future if we meld with them. So that's a massive jump that can occur. And that massive jump causes another massive jump in consciousness. And this consciousness renaissance we go through is pretty crazy, but it does happen over generations, according to the Anshar and their past. The Blue Avians have always stated that this was just a natural cycle. It was not, it wasn't that things just got so bad here that all the angelics got together and said, okay, enough is enough. It was just a natural part of how the cosmic machine works. This would cause not only a consciousness expansion, but the energetics were going to cause our DNA to change in vibration and other strands become more energetically available to us. And that helps us with that helps us with the spiritual side, more bandwidth, energy bandwidth. Now, on the timeline that the Blue Avians showed me, they did show me the buildup of, as the sun got, more of the energy was feeding through the sun, the earth begins to heat up from the inside, from the energy from the sun, and volcanoes begin to get much more active. And then the storms become more and more powerful, more and more energetic. And these are all just signs of the energetics building up in our solar system. One of the major things they said to watch for is when volcanoes start erupting all around the world. But what was interesting about the meteor is that it was shown to me that because of the energetics, the electrical charge of the Earth is changing, and it's affecting the way things are attracted to it. So some more debris is being pulled towards the Earth. And one of them was a meteor that was pulled in over the Pacific Ocean, exploded pretty high up in the atmosphere and sent a shock wave and caused a tsunami. Not a super devastating one, but a tsunami. And that just seemed to be some sort of a marker. It was after a lot of this was shown to me in dreams and through technology that I decided to move my family to Colorado. Yeah, nice. It's one of the safe zones that they showed me. The SmartPad information basically, connects to some ET databases, but mainly connects to all the dark military scientific databases. And like I said, the scuttlebutt in the programs was that this was going to happen at the end of the solar minimum, which could be next year or the year after. So, I bet if we talked to 5 different people in here, we would get 5 different answers on what ascension is. And you know what? We won't know until the time, will we? So, the SSP Alliance, like I said, there are a lot of different ideas about what will occur, but most of all, they believe that the fulfillment of their prophecies, biblical prophecies, and some other prophecies that we've never seen that are hidden prophecies, a part of their secret manuscripts, that they are watching to occur, and in many cases, they're trying to make occur. You know, they'll make wars in certain cities, ancient cities occur to, you know, like Damascus. They're trying to make certain prophecies be fulfilled. Now, the Anshar, as I stated, they believe that it, is there a noise feedback? I don't know if they can take care of that. So, you know, we've pretty much talked about this. It's a natural part of evolution according to the Anshar. And according to the law of one, those who remain in fourth density upon this plane will be of a positive orientation. So it appears that I think that a major part of the negativity being removed from our solar system is going to be the AI. The AI seems to be the biggest problem in the universe. No matter how advanced beings are, they seem to be wrestling with AI in one way or another. Now here we go. Their history. All right. So they have, all three groups have studied that and put out how much they understand our co-creative consciousness and our mass consciousness, how it can create reality. So the question that was asked, and it's a good question, by Sigmund. Sigmund does not trust the Anshar or the Nordics or any of the groups. He's saying if we have this co-creative ability and the cabal has used movies to control our co-creative abilities to create what they would like, how do we know that the Anshar really are us in the future, and how do we know that they're not telling us this information to get us to co-create it? Good questions, and I don't know the answer to that. I haven't sensed deception from them, but they're much more advanced beings than I will ever be, so I can't pretend that I'm advanced enough to know, you know, what's going on in their consciousness. But all I can do is observe and report, and that's what I'm going to do. Now, a lot of the type of information I was shown has been popping up in prophecy going back thousands of years. Even Edgar Cayce talked about very similar things. So, you know, the Book of Enoch, a bunch of other texts, they talk about, you know, cataclysms and things that sound like pole shifts. Now, recently, I spent 3 days with the Anshar, and I got to end up spending some time with the elders. And the elders pretty much spend a great deal of their time in the chairs. And the elders are probably the number one group that are connecting with people. They were trying to teach me how to use the chair, to interact with the chair. And have y'all used the biofeedback toys to where you'll put a little thing on your head and try to get a ball to float, and you sit there and you finally figure it out? It was kind of similar to that. What they started out showing me was how they observe us. They sit in these chairs, and they will observe us at home or at work, and they have a readout. They know what we're thinking and what we're postulating. Like if a scientist is sitting there, and he's very close to a breakthrough, but not quite there, they'll just do this little ball thing comes up and floats, and they're messing around that, kind of like a mouse tracker. And they'll do things with it, and they'll give people a download, an informational download. And the information comes in like a zip file, and then it just unzips inside the person, and it's like original thought to the person. And they've been doing that. And what's weird is they do that to maintain the timeline, but it's also their entertainment. It's like watching television. Some of them will follow, it's like almost like a soap opera. They will follow us for like 5 generations. You know, they'll see a person, they'll be, oh, you remember his great-great-grandfather, how he would act that way? He kind of looks like him too, you know. They follow us that long because they live over 900 years. So, I mean, that was a little disturbing. I don't know, when you think you're alone, you spend your time a lot differently after, you know, you wear a towel when you wouldn't normally wear a towel. Because, I mean, they're probably floating around here right now observing us. But that was pretty, I mean, they spend a lot of time in the chairs and a lot of time observing and interacting with us. We just don't realize it. A lot of time in our dreams, too. So once I finally got to a point to where they didn't have to spend all their energy helping me use the chair, and I could use it somewhat on my own, I started interacting with this one elder in particular. And Elil, he was almost 1,000 years old, and he spends almost all of his time in these chairs interacting and observing humanity. And they also observe other beings. They can they can sit in a chair, and if they want to know what's going on, like if the reptilians are having a meeting, they're there, just like they would do with us. And I don't think there's any real way of keeping them out. It's pretty amazing. So let's see. So I discussed the huge plasma hurricane. A lot of there was disturbing visuals that came along. You know, people bobbing around in the water like dead fish, and just horrible visuals. A lot of sea life dead, burned, like it had been boiled. But it was a small portion. It wasn't the whole Earth. It wasn't like I was expecting. It was a smaller local event. Now, when the Earth is knocked off its axis, there were some major tsunamis, nearly a mile high. And what land wasn't encroached upon by those tsunamis was then hit really hard by winds. The tsunamis pushed the air. And so if a tsunami is traveling near the speed of sound, if it's like 600 or 700 miles per hour, the air is being pushed as well. So there are this air blast just blasts across, and areas that are not in safe zones had a pretty rough time. And there's the simulation again. You see that little swirl of where that's supposed to be the... So what they showed me next was amazing. The sun literally turned into a giant coronal hole. It was not black, but it was almost black. And it was that way for a number of days, and then it just, poof, it comes back with a big explosion, comes back into equilibrium, and it's now a different type of star, slightly different type of star. It went through its fourth density evolution. When I've talked to these beings about why does the Earth have to go through this cataclysm, why, what's up with that, they said, I'm told that on all the different planets, there is some sort of planetary disruption. And when I've asked them, is there a way to stop it from happening? And they asked me, who are you to interfere with the transition of a planet going into fourth density? So it's kind of hard to argue with. Can't argue with it. So what happens is you see the solar flare knock everything out. The survivors on the planet, if aid had not been rendered, 90% of them would die. I mean, this was a technological civilization. Technology's gone. So civilization is gone. There is a cosmic loophole to where when civilization has collapsed, or if it's below a certain level, that ETs can come in and openly interact with us. And that's happened with us many times in the past. What happened was, it was almost immediately after this event occurred, you begin to see some stragglers, small little numbers of secret space program people that survived that were coming to try to help basically their people here on the Earth. But simultaneous with that, you see all of the sky is covered in clouds. You can't see the stars. All of a sudden, all of these stars all over the Earth start to appear in the sky under the clouds, and they just hover there. And then they all in unison, not one at a time, all in unison, drop and come down to the Earth and begin to render aid to everyone, and helping them stabilize and deal with the trauma, and then begin to share with them information about the different projects and, I mean, everything. And then that's when a lot of us go into our rebellious stage. And one of the other things that I found interesting was that even the Anshar are born and die and still go through the karmic cycle. So a lot of us that are expecting a flash to happen in the sky, and then there's no more suffering, there's no more death. Apparently, many generations of us still have to go through this karmic cycle, and allow for the full all of the consciousness to catch up. It's a process. It's not what I was taught when I was a little kid by my granddad, but now, the solar event destroys all artificial intelligence in the solar system and nanites. What, according to the Anshar, is going to be curious is how we respond to all of a sudden seeing bewildered grays and reptilians walking around, having no idea what's going on, or any memory or understanding of why they behaved the way they had. I mean, these beings will basically be blank slates. And there are going to also be some humanoids and humans that have had those implants that have done bad things, that after the implants are removed, we're going to have to figure out what's the ethical way to deal with them. A lot of how we deal with this information pivots us into the type of reality we're going to have next, because a lot of disturbing things are going to be revealed to humanity. Humanity's already going to be very ticked off, and to find out that truly they had been slaves and genetic experiments, it's going to be a rough time. But for about 1,000 years, we're in this energetic field that prevents any type of AI, prevents these negative Orion groups from coming back in, and it's an energy field that is maintained somehow by these sixth density and higher beings. I don't fully understand how. They've tried to show me. I don't have the ability to comprehend. And if I tried to repeat it, probably wouldn't make sense. So, the number one takeaway, I guess, going back to the 1930s, whether they channeled or reported actual face-to-face encounters, everyone who has had an ET experience, and an in-depth one, they usually report that the ETs want two things: us to work on disclosure, revealing suppressed technologies, the existence of ETs, very important. And second is to grow spiritually, or to expand your consciousness. And that's something that we're working on both sides of. We're trying to get as many groups as we can together to unite and begin to do demonstrations. We're talking about doing red pill parties, to where you can invite people over and find different ways to wake them up. And that's all great, but the number one thing that needs to be done, basically the Blue Avians, stated before they left as well, is that we have to start healing the trauma. This cycle of being caught up in the trauma and not able to fulfill our mission because of the trauma, we don't have time for that anymore. It's time for us to deal with these things and move on and focus on trying to bring out the most optimal temporal reality for all of us. I think that just about everyone in this room is most likely a starseed. They felt called to be here to experience this. I was told that I agreed to this, although I've asked repeatedly for some sort of a video clip of me signing, you know. And I haven't had one yet, but supposedly we agreed to this. And supposedly we're here for a reason. And I think that right now we should focus all of our energy on finding out what that reason is. If you already know what your mission is, then now is a time not to let anything hold you back. This is the Great Awakening. All of us, every single person in here chose to come here, and believe it or not, you chose to have all these crazy experiences, to have this perspective. You chose to do whatever weird little hobbies, weird jobs that brought you this knowledge, and you didn't know how you would ever use it. But it looks like now's the time. Going back to the trauma, we came here to have these experiences, and we supposedly agreed to the trauma. But as we came here as starseeds and were identified and seen as a threat, and they traumatize us, they don't realize they're training us for our mission. All we have to do is then learn how to let go of the energy of that trauma and then look back at those experiences and use them against the enemy. We've all been trained. We just need to do the final part. So I think right now, I've talked with David, and I'm going to use David because he's been doing this for 20 years. And he has stated that he has never seen the community so jazzed up and ready to get involved, ready to make a difference. Usually he would sit there and, you know, they would smile and be happy in the seats, but now they're asking, what can I do? How can I get involved? And to that question, I say, you don't have to jump on my bandwagon, jump on your own bandwagon. Use your skills, your talents, these weird little oddball jobs that you've done where you've picked up this knowledge and you didn't know why. Use those to affect the mass consciousness in a positive way. That art, music, even people who have business knowledge, they don't understand why they became so proficient in business. When all of us come together, we find a way to take all of those skill sets and make them work. And I think that we're coming together during this time for a reason, because we are service to others. So, what do you do? What do you do from here? I've told people that it's probably not a good idea to go to your family tonight and talk about 8-foot-tall bluebirds. How many of you have tried that? Yeah, okay, I figured. Okay, how did it go? Not so good, right? Yeah. I haven't had the guts to try that one myself. The focus should be on suppressed technologies. There's a lot of information out there about suppressed health technologies, information out there about what's going on with all the vaccines. There are a lot of things more down to earth that you can focus on to begin to expand people's consciousness. And I think that if we use our skills, if we're artists, if we make movie clips, or whatever, if we use those skill sets mindfully towards our mission, then we are definitely going to make some major changes to this world. And I think that's what we're here for, and now is the time. I mean, if you look around, now is the time. Now. I've been talking about this for a year. I'm happy to announce that Return of the Guardians is now on sale. Finally. Thank you. Now, this is I think a lot of people in the community have been trying to figure out what in the heck is Corey doing? He's like making a comic book. He's talking about doing, movies and all these other weird things. Why? Well, one of the things Thierry explained to me is that we need to use the tools that are being used against us. All of us have some sort of an ability to affect the mass consciousness, to affect even just a small part of the mass consciousness in little groups. If we can come up with things, like imagine if you had this book and you could hand it over to someone, okay? They look at it, they're into sci-fi, but they're not into aliens. I don't know how, but that's, yeah. Sci-fi people are primed for this. And they usually read books about people killing each other and, in different clever ways, but they get information about consciousness and the expansion of technologies secretly, and it's done in an entertaining way. Well, this information is getting into their subconscious, and it begins to work on them. Their higher self uses that information and leverages that against other experiences and information coming in. If we can, not just me, if all of you, if you have experiences, go out and do your own comic book or movie or something. Find a way to use your creativity and the abilities that you came here with to affect the mass consciousness. That's what I hope most people leave here with. And also, buy my comic book. And of course, in August, how many people here went to Eclipse of Disclosure? A few? Yeah, it was an awesome event, a very family-oriented event. We're going to have another one. It's going to be in Colorado this time, Loveland, Dimensions of Disclosure. As you can see, we're having some big speakers, and there's going to be camping and a major family environment. That's what we try to encourage in our little our festivals, is to people to be able to bring their kids. So we're looking forward to that. And of course, I've got a very large group of artists that help me put together these presentations. I would not be able to do anything like the production value that my team brings, and I really appreciate it because they mostly do it free of charge. So